Hello, and welcome to the ICRIS training video for updating linear resources. Our canals, roads, trails, railroads, transmission lines, and other things of the linear nature. Please note that this video has been updated from the original version, and some processes and features of ICRIS have changed. We have other videos on our site about creating new resources, and about updating existing non-linear resources. Please refer to these videos for those topics. I have one quick note before we really get started, and that's that the guidance on our website, found at history.idaho.gov/SHPO/ICRIS. The guidance on our website has a lot of information on linear resources. Please refer to this page for more information beyond what I will talk about in this tutorial. So I've gone ahead and created a project and filled out some of the information. I've not yet drawn my potential area of effect, but I've already zoomed to the location where I think it's going to be. So I'll go ahead and draw my polygon. And I'll go ahead and set this to the standard 1 mile buffer. So I'll scroll down to Project Resources and choose Literature Review from the dropdown. And here we see we have at least one linear resource. If we wanted to find other specifically linear resources, we could change our sort from association to property type. And as we scroll through the pages, we'll find our linear resources, and you can see US 191, the Alliance Canal, the Union Pacific Railroad, and some other canals. Sometimes resources that we expect to show up in the literature review don't. They may not even show up on the map. For instance, in this project, we'd expect US Highway 20 to be recorded here, but it doesn't seem to be. It's not on our map, and it's not in our list of resources. It's easy to assume that the resource just has never been recorded and that you need to go ahead and create a new resource for that. If you suspect you might have a situation like this, stay tuned for the end of the video where I'll show you how to pull up resources that may not be within your project area or listed in this list. For now, we're going to work with a resource that does show up in our literature review. The Burgess Canal is going to be our test resource. So remember, when you're updating an existing resource, we always hit Create New Version. And this will take you to the resource page for the Burgess Canal. So the process of updating the resource record may be familiar if you've seen our Updating Existing Resources video. And you'll remember from that video, if we scroll down, we can see all the legacy site forms. And if the resource has been recorded within ICRIS before, it'll have something called a linear segment form, which this one has not been re-recorded yet. And we'll talk about that linear segment form in just a second. And you can open these and poke around to find more information about the resource. So we've got a pretty good description. So similar to updating other nonlinear resources, we want to make sure that we don't delete any of this great information from the record unless it happens to be incorrect, which you've determined based on your research. If that is the case, please refer to our Updating Existing Resources video. Since we've already gone through how to update a lot of these sections in that video, we're going to talk about the unique thing about linear resources. So a linear resource is a resource for the overall resource. So the Burgess Canal resource is for the overall Burgess Canal. Now, within your specific project, you may only have a segment of the Burgess Canal that you'll be recording. That being said, while you may only have a portion, your updates within the ICRIS record here should only be about the entire resource. So the total 19 miles long from Dry Bed to the Snake River. Only information we should find in any of these fields, description, history, eligibility, justification, and property type, should be about the overall record. Information about your specific segment belongs inside the linear segment form. Also, no information about your project should go on this resource record. Before we move on to talking about the linear segment form, let's go over to the property type tab. And here we have something that's a little bit different from a resource record for, say, a building. We have the same feature information category, but feature count for canals and roads and railroads are a little bit different. So for a canal, a feature may be a headgate or a culvert, and for a road, it may be something like a bridge. And if you find features within your segment, such as a siphon or a headgate, please make sure you keep note of these and add them to the feature count. So let's say for our segment for the Burgess Canal, we observed 2 culverts. So we type 2 in the feature count since it started at 0, and then we'd say 2 culverts. And as you go through the existing information about the record, if you see any other features called out, please also add these to the description and the count. As a general rule, we never want to speak for features that exist outside of your segment. So if the feature count and description included a siphon, but it wasn't observed in your individual segment, and little information is provided in the previous documentation, just assume that the siphon is in another segment and keep that information in the record. So if our feature count when we opened the site form was 1, and it just said 1 siphon, don't delete that information just because you didn't observe it. Just assume that it's at another portion of the segment and add your 2 culverts and update that resource count to 3. Please also note that if you have something like a railroad or a road and it has a bridge as a feature, in most cases, you also need to record the bridge as an individual resource. This is not the case with something like a culvert on a canal like this, but it's something to keep in mind. But it's something to watch out for as you look at your list from the literature review and you do your field work. So let's talk a little bit about the linear segment form. The form can be found within our SHPO guidance in that linear resources section that I showed you earlier, or it can be found under documents if you just go to history.idaho.gov/SHPO/IGRIS. And as we open it, we'll see we have this fillable Word document, and you'll see you need to tell us where your segment originates and ends, some information about the name and the county, and then we'll ask you to write a description of your particular section of the resource. And you should also say whether you think your particular section contributes to the overall resource's status of eligibility. So maybe your segment has been diverted or rerouted or realigned, and in many cases that would make it non-contributing. So you check that box and write your justification here. And I'll remind you again to keep all of this information out of the overall resource record. Once you've filled this out and added your map, you can add it to the project attachment section for your resource. So it would go here. And you can use the category of other and just type linear segment form and hit save. So in many cases, changing the GIS for the resource isn't going to be super necessary. Here we see the Burgess Canal generally follows its path. And sometimes you may need to zoom into your specific project area. Here it is over by the Rigby Skate Park. So there's been either a miscalculation in the GIS or a sort of realignment here. Since we don't know exactly when or why that occurred, what we're going to do is add another shape into this site record for this segment since it's in our APE. So just generally follow where the canal is and double click to end your line. And this is an agricultural waterway because it's a canal, and we'll update the shape. So now we see that we sort of have this deviation, but then we have the canal here. But don't worry too much about fixing little things like this. Obviously, it's not going to line up perfectly. And I'll just say again, you should only ever update the geometry for the segment of this resource that you surveyed. So don't go over here and start making updates because you didn't survey that area, whereas you actually know that this is not where the canal is. If you make a wrong move while you're updating the GIS, please don't freak out. We have this button called Reset GIS Shapes that reverts it back to the original resource GIS. So you can just hit that, and that little line you made will go away. So and I'll just redraw it here. Now, while we're in the GIS, we're also going to go ahead and check this district tab. So sometimes when you have a district that's close by, let's say this area of homes right here that are eligible is a historic district, the name of the historic district and its Smithsonian number will pop up here, and it'll ask you a question of whether or not this linear resource should be included in that district. Unless it's part of the district, you're going to select no from the drop-down. We also want to add photos to the resource. So you can see the resource has no photos right now, but even if there are several photos here, you should continue to upload the ones that you took as part of your project area survey and add a descriptive caption detailing the location, including the direction you're facing while taking the photo, the date, and any features that are pictured, if any. So let's add some resource photos. Now we require 2, but we happily accept more. And even if there are already photos attached to the resource, please upload your photos of your specific segment, because the more we have for the entire resource, the better picture we get of the whole thing. So I'm going to upload these 2, and I'm going to provide a really nice caption where I call out the location. So Centennial Road looking west, and the direction you're facing while taking the photo. Approximate date, so let's just say September 2024. And there are no features pictured in this photo, so we will save that caption. And then we'll add a caption and make this the overview image. And we'll say Centennial Road looking south. View of Culvert 1. And then you can add more and more photos, but for this example, I'll just do these 2. So once you've filled out all of your information, you can mark your resource complete. If you have anything missing, ICRIS will now tell you exactly what you're missing so that you can fix it and submit it. And now you know how to update a linear resource. So before we finish out this tutorial, I mentioned earlier that sometimes your linear resource may be missing from your literature review because the GIS that has been recorded for the resource you're looking for may have been recorded outside of your APE or in another county or something like that. So I'm going to take the last couple of minutes to show you how to find the resource and add it to this literature review list. So what we'll do is go to ICRIS and go to the search tab and make sure you're on resources. And we're going to look for that US Highway 20 that we didn't see in our project APE or in our list. So you may have to try a couple of different names. See, US 20, there's a railroad, there's a couple houses that were recorded with that address name. Let's try US Highway 20. And this looks like it. So we'll zoom to the shape. And we can see a portion of it has been recorded in Boise. It's been recorded through Camas, Blaine, Butte counties. But it looks like it hasn't been completely recorded in Jefferson and Madison counties. And our project's in Jefferson and it's in Rigby. So we'll kind of zoom in. And we know that the US 20 route is right next to the current US 20 route, like right here. What we can do is we can find a place where it has been recorded. And a little hint also is if you're familiar with your Smithsonian numbers and the counties that the two letters stand for, BM is Bingham, so that's kind of a hint as to where you might find the resource recorded. And here we see this is US Highway 20. So we'll go back to our project area, and what we'll do is either type in an address or mouse your way over to where you know the resource is. Oh, and if you don't have county layers on, by the way, that's a little trick. You can go to Layers and Idaho Boundaries and turn your county layers on so you can see them. Sometimes that's set to off for some people. And sometimes you'll have to open your resources back up to see where you can find it. Looks like it's at the top of the county. So over here. Aha! So here we go. So all you'll need to do is draw yourself a little polygon that just includes your resource that you're looking for. Just take your buffer down to 0 so it only includes that. And then scroll back down to project resources. Sometimes you may need to refresh it, but it looks like this time it's popped up. And there you have US Highway 20, and you can click Create New Version and get started editing that. And if you're having trouble finding where your resource might be, please feel free to reach out to us at ishs.idaho.gov before you go ahead and create a new linear resource. We want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel with our resources and that we're updating them if they exist. So you can go ahead with editing all your information here, add your photos and things like that. You'll need to upload your linear segment form, and we would also ask you to update the GIS for the county as if it's a completely new resource, and especially within your project area. So map away, and just follow whatever maps you have. And once again, I remind you, you can reset GIS shapes if you mess up. And for this resource, we'll update it with the category of new roads. And if you mess up, just hit reset GIS shapes and you can start all over again. And if you're not exactly sure where the old alignment is, do the best that you can and we'll help you as we review your project. You can go back to your project and delete that extra shape since it's not actually in your APE as well. And other than that, that is all I have to teach you about updating linear resources. Please remember that our guidance is available at history.idaho.gov/SHPO/ICRIS. Thank you for watching.